Well, my dear. They used to talk over you, now they talk through you. Your name has become the calibration point of truth itself. When accusations fly and narratives crumble, they pull your name like a sword from its sheath. Because your existence alone ends arguments. That's how deep you've embedded yourself into the psychology of this era. You became the metric. People invoke your name not because they love you, but because it terrifies them to admit how wrong they've been without it. You turned your name into a verdict, one that cuts sharper than proof. You were never supposed to have this kind of gravity. They thought your presence was temporary, a phase, a spark. But you evolved into the reference point of credibility, the kind of name that carries quiet destruction in its mention. Now, when someone lies, the quickest way to expose them is to compare them to you. You've become the human polygraph, a walking audit of authenticity. They can't fake what you embody. They can't mimic what you manifest. Every time someone tries, the air around them collapses from the weight of falsehood. You changed the rhythm of how people speak your name. It's no longer casual, it's ceremonial. It carries risk now. There's a consequence to uttering it. Because saying your name is like holding a mirror that doesn't lie. It exposes them. You didn't beg for respect. You redefined what respect costs. And now they're realizing truth is expensive when your presence enters the conversation. Once, your name triggered gossip. Now it triggers confessions. That's not growth. That's power evolution. You don't convince people anymore. You convict them. You became evidence. The funny part is, this wasn't revenge. It was alignment. While they were focused on perception, you were mastering precision. You didn't try to win the crowd. You learned how to control the temperature of the room. When they mention your name, it chills the air. You turned influence into atmosphere. People can't just discuss you, they feel you. And that's where the tables turned. Because energy doesn't lie. They weaponized your name once, thinking they could bury you under it. Now it's a relic of their defeat. The same letters they used to defame you are now engraved in their own downfall. You became too accurate to doubt, too consistent to question. You turned exposure into encryption. Now the truth moves only when you authorize it. The world started noticing patterns. Every time someone doubted you, something inside them unraveled. Their lies aged faster than their faces. Their reputations thinned while yours thickened into legend. You didn't have to prove anything. Reality did it for you. You just stayed disciplined while chaos tried to impersonate confidence. You moved in silence but operated like thunder, without the noise, but with impact that lingers. And people finally understood. Your power isn't in your words. It's in the accuracy of your energy. You don't have to speak to correct people. Your presence does the recalibration. You're not chasing validation anymore. Validation is chasing you for credibility. Every narrative that touches your name must be purified before it survives the timeline. You became a filter for truth. They used to call you intense, as if it were an insult. Now they call you undeniable, because intensity became the new standard. You turned skepticism into study. Now they analyze your every move not to judge, but to understand. You made being misunderstood the first stage of being legendary. People don't laugh at what they can't categorize anymore. They archive it. Behind every whisper about you, there's a confession. I couldn't do what they did. That's why your name travels differently. It doesn't move through mouths. It moves through fear, admiration, and unfinished karma. People who doubted you find themselves quoting you. People who mocked you now use your blueprint to survive. And the irony, they still can't admit it. Because acknowledging you means acknowledging how little they knew about power. They can't replicate you because they don't understand the science behind your stillness. They thought you disappeared. But you were calculating, recalibrating, waiting for precision to meet timing. And now that both aligned, there's nothing they can do but orbit around your influence like satellites, feeding off a dying signal. You're not a name anymore. You're a reference in conversations about authenticity. You're the standard they hate to love. Even the ones who wanted to erase you can't move without mentioning you. They used to say, "You're crazy." Now they say, "You were right." That's what truth does. It ages beautifully. You made time your lawyer. You didn't rush justice. You let it accumulate interest. And now, the debt is visible. The same people who doubted you use your name to prove someone else is lying. That's not coincidence, that's poetic correction. You became the receipt of everything they tried to deny. You taught the world something dangerous. Real doesn't need defense. Real dismantles everything built on fiction just by existing. You don't argue anymore. You demonstrate. You've turned self-control into a superpower. Because when you're not reactive, you become reflective. People project themselves off you now. They measure their integrity by how your name feels in their mouth. And for most of them, it burns. Because truth doesn't taste good to those who built their confidence on deception. They can't handle that you don't need them anymore. You don't play social chess. You control the board layout. You dictate tempo by indifference. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It radiates. They thought they broke you when they ignored you. They didn't realize you were building privacy into authority. You trained your energy to carry its own verification. That's why no rumor can survive in your presence. It evaporates. People learned to shut up, not because you silenced them, but because reality embarrassed them for you. You've become the quiet correction in a loud generation. Every time they say your name, it comes with a pause, because they know if they lie, reality will catch up before you ever have to respond. That's the level you've reached. Cosmic accountability disguised as calmness. Now their reputations depend on how close they can stand to your truth without combusting. They use your name to prove honesty, because without it, their words hold no weight. You became gravity itself, the center of credibility. They orbit your energy, hoping proximity grants them significance. But the truth is, you can't borrow authenticity. You have to survive it. You've survived everything they thought would bury you. And each survival added compound interest to your presence. Now you walk with that invisible authority that people feel before they hear. Your reputation isn't reputation anymore. It's resonance. It moves through frequencies that lies can't reach. They envy that control, that calm precision. You turned being doubted into a competitive advantage. You let them build illusions while you built infrastructure. And now, your composure is their confession. You don't expose people. They expose themselves, trying to contradict you. You've become too strategic to be slandered. Every attempt to frame you collapses under its own inconsistency. Because you've mastered what they'll never grasp. Truth doesn't argue. It documents. And every chapter they tried to erase became proof of your resilience. They tried to write you out, but you rewrote the genre. There's a certain fear now when your name surfaces. It's not fear of what you'll say. It's fear of what your existence reminds them of. You're the evidence that authenticity wins long-term. You're the proof that silence isn't weakness, it's surveillance. You've watched them fold under their own masks, and now they're trapped in the irony of having to cite your name to regain credibility. You turned being underestimated into a business model. Every doubt became marketing. Every rumor became reach. You didn't need revenge. You needed rhythm. You let truth catch up to noise, and when it did, it buried the noise permanently. Now people don't defend you. They use you as defense. You're the proof that stillness is strategy, that clarity is more dangerous than chaos. You became untouchable not because you fought harder, but because you understood patterns. Every accusation, every insult, every dismissal, it was predictable data. You mapped it. You reverse-engineered deceit into discipline. You turned their pettiness into your psychology lab. You studied human nature until it couldn't surprise you anymore. And that's why your presence unsettles them. You're not reacting from emotion. You're operating from understanding. You've turned empathy into encryption. They tried to play politics. You played precision. They tried to manipulate. You mastered momentum. Every attempt to defame you became free promotion, because you understood something most people never learn. Reputation doesn't come from noise. It comes from narrative control. You never defended yourself. You just let truth reveal itself through time. That's why your legacy isn't rumor-proof. It's rumor-immune. You don't have to fix lies when reality does it faster. And now, the people who lied about you are terrified of how calm you are. That calmness is the scariest revenge. They can't decode it. You became a case study in emotional intelligence disguised as dominance. You know the power of restraint. You know the art of patience. You know the thrill of letting people expose themselves through their contradictions. You turned your name into psychological gravity. Every time they mention it, it rearranges the hierarchy. You didn't destroy their reputations. They handed them over. And that's where you live now. Beyond opinion. You've transcended the fragile ecosystem of rumor and reputation. You've become a jurisdiction unto yourself. There's no debate anymore, only verification. They use your name like a litmus test. It's the chemical that reveals who's authentic and who's performing. You changed the currency of conversation. Influence used to belong to the loudest voice, but now it belongs to the most consistent proof. And that's you. You turned credibility into an ecosystem that only you can breathe in. When your name surfaces, everything false loses oxygen. They thought destroying your image would destroy your impact. But the opposite happened. You detached image from identity. You became substance without needing surface. Now people can feel the weight of your truth, even when they try to look away. They don't need to see you. They sense you. That's how powerful your calibration has become. You trained the collective subconscious to recognize your frequency as evidence. And when the subconscious of the public recognizes you as truth, no propaganda can survive the encounter. You've rewritten the psychology of authority. There was a time when your name was an easy target. People used it to inflate their own relevance, to bait reactions, to sound informed. They didn't realize that every mention built your infrastructure. You weaponized underestimation into marketing. Every time someone mocked you, they advertised you. Every denial became distribution. That's why their reputations deflated. They spent their credibility trying to dent yours. You taught them a cruel math. The more they said your name, the smaller theirs became. Because truth compounds, while lies depreciate. Now even your silence carries risk for them. When you don't respond, the narrative eats itself. When you speak, the narrative resets. Either way, you win. That's not arrogance, that's architecture. You designed your legacy to be self-sustaining. You turned authenticity into automation. Your character became a self-correcting system that requires no defense, only existence. That's why they panic when your name trends again. It's not nostalgia, it's accountability coming back around. You know what really terrifies them? The permanence of accuracy. They can't cancel what time confirms. You don't chase trends, you time-stamp them. Every season that passes validates something you said, something you predicted, something you stood on when everyone else trembled. You're not just part of the timeline, you're the audit trail. That's why even people who dislike you can't discredit you. They have to reference you to remain relevant. Your name has become the gravitational field around which truth reorganizes itself. And that realization breaks egos. It dismantles the psychology of superiority. Because you didn't rise by imitation, you rose by demonstration. You didn't perform truth. You embodied it so thoroughly that lies can't coexist near you. Every room you enter becomes an exam. Every person who mentions you exposes their relationship with reality. That's how you flip the hierarchy. They used to call meetings about you. Now they use you as the meeting's conclusion. They can't escape it. You're integrated into the cultural bloodstream. Your mannerisms, your phrasing, your precision, it's everywhere. You don't own the narrative anymore. The narrative owns your blueprint. Even your critics rely on your structure to sound coherent. They use your logic to dismantle their own illusions, and they hate that dependency. Because deep down they know, without your standard, they'd still be guessing. You gave shape to clarity, and clarity is lethal to confusion-based power. They can't gaslight the audience anymore. People have tasted verified truth through you, and that taste ruined manipulation permanently. Once the public experiences genuine integrity, every imitation reeks of desperation. That's why your haters are quieter now. The environment no longer rewards distortion. You trained people's intuition without saying a word. You made awareness fashionable. You made intelligence feel dangerous again. They study you now, not to copy, but to comprehend how someone could stay that consistent under that much pressure. You've become a case study in psychological sovereignty. The way you navigate chaos, the way you dissect energy, the way you refuse to be provoked. It all became data for the next generation of thinkers. You turned composure into a curriculum. Universities can't teach what you embodied, the art of being both weapon and peace treaty. Your name isn't reputation anymore, it's resonance. It vibrates through conversations you'll never hear. It settles arguments you'll never attend. It protects people you don't even know, just by existing as a standard. Someone somewhere right now is saying, "But remember what they said." And that statement alone collapses deceit. That's what legacy looks like. It's truth moving through people you'll never meet. The most dangerous thing about you is that you made authenticity contagious. People around you start telling the truth accidentally. They drop pretenses without realizing it, because your energy forbids fiction. You turned self-respect into a frequency field. That's why manipulators can't survive near you. They suffocate in honesty. And even when they try to copy your tone, it feels off. Because imitation without integrity is static, and you operate in high definition. They used to talk at you. Now they talk around you. Every sentence that includes your name carries strategy. They measure words, monitor tone, double-check facts, because they know one misstep will reveal everything. You're not just a person anymore. You're a truth detector built from experience. You didn't earn this power overnight. You accumulated it through humiliation, resilience, and an unbreakable relationship with accuracy. You didn't guess, you verified. You didn't assume, you observed. And that's why every lie collapses in your proximity. It can't survive sustained observation. They thought the world forgot you when you went quiet. But your quiet wasn't absence. It was absorption. You were gathering proof, refining precision, turning every doubt into documentation. By the time you resurfaced, reality had already sided with you. That's why no one debates you now. They just adapt. You broke the loop of explanation. People don't need your permission to believe in you anymore. Reality does it for them. You've become the blueprint for reputational reversal. You showed that endurance outperforms exposure. They used temporary outrage. You used timeless consistency. You didn't trend, you transformed. You made accuracy a lifestyle. And now, when deception tries to dress itself as confidence, people notice the costume immediately. You trained an entire demographic to sense discrepancy. That's cultural engineering disguised as personal growth. They can't destroy what they depend on. Even your enemies rely on your structure to maintain their narratives. You've become the backbone of modern integrity. That's why betrayal hurts them more than it hurt you. Because cutting ties with you means cutting ties with credibility. You're the certification they'll never regain. You were never competing, you were calibrating. And now, every comparison exposes the deficit between effort and essence. They call it arrogance because they can't label self-mastery. They call it mystery because they can't decode discipline. But what really bothers them is that you never retaliated. You let truth do the violence. You let time swing the hammer. You let evidence accumulate until it became undeniable. You've become the quiet catastrophe to their fabricated confidence. And that, right there, is why your name holds more weight than their reputations. It carries history that never needed a PR team. There's a science behind your calm. You understand that chaos consumes itself if you just outlast it. You don't react to noise, you measure it. You know that every lie burns fuel, and truth doesn't. That's why they run out of energy while you still expand. You've made patience your punishment for them. They can't keep up because deception requires constant maintenance. You require none. They whisper now before speaking your name. They check alliances. They scan rooms. Because your name isn't casual anymore, it's consequential. It divides crowds into two types, those who respect truth and those who fear it. And both groups orbit you differently. Respect feeds your rise. Fear fuels your legend. Either way, the hierarchy rearranges itself every time your identity enters conversation. That's social physics. That's dominance without aggression. You've entered the rare territory where credibility becomes currency. People trade influence for proximity to you. They barter silence for association. They align publicly, even if they envy privately. Because everyone knows resistance to truth is recession. You are the inflation of authenticity, and their false value systems are collapsing under your weight. The thing about turning tables is that you didn't flip them violently. You rotated perception so subtly that people didn't realize they were standing on the wrong side until it was too late. Now they're forced to play by your principles. And your principles are expensive. Precision costs energy. Honesty costs comfort. Consistency costs masks. That's why they can't sustain it. The price of truth is too high for actors. But you paid in isolation, in misunderstanding, in exile, and now you collect in peace, influence, and unshakable identity. Every mention of you now carries a timestamp of regret from someone who once doubted you. Every argument that references you carries a debt of recognition. You became a cautionary tale and an inspiration simultaneously. They tell people not to underestimate you, and in that warning, they advertise your power. That's what poetic justice looks like. The world marketing your authenticity through the mouths of those who tried to erase it. And still, you stay grounded because you understand the paradox. Power without awareness collapses, but awareness without ego multiplies. You wield both with precision. You're not hungry for validation. You're calibrated to verification. You don't need applause. You measure alignment. That's what separates you from performers. You're not seeking to impress. You're seeking to imprint. And you've succeeded. Your name is now the watermark on every truth that survives public scrutiny. You've become the unspoken rule. If your name backs it, it's real. If it contradicts you, it collapses eventually. That's not belief. It's pattern recognition. History keeps proving you right because you built your narrative on physics, not popularity. You studied cause and consequence while they studied optics. And optics fade. Precision doesn't. That's why your influence doesn't trend. It accumulates. It ages into authority. Now every whisper, every accusation, every attempt to rewrite your legacy turns into a free lesson in the cost of deception. People watch your enemies deteriorate in real time, and they understand what truth does to falsehood. It starves it. You've become the embodiment of karmic mathematics. No revenge, no spectacle, just balance executing itself through your presence. The beauty of it? You never even asked for this power. You just refused to lie. And the universe rewarded that refusal by making you unforgettable. You became a psychological landmark, proof that integrity, when mastered, becomes intimidation. You don't need to threaten anyone. Your composure does it for you. Your calmness is the new chaos to them. Because when a person like you enters the equation, manipulation dies quietly. They'll never admit it publicly, but they fear you. Not because of what you might say, but because of what your existence confirms. You turn their lies into mirrors. You force them to see themselves without their makeup of ego. And now, every time your name surfaces, it drags truth behind it, like a comet through atmosphere, burning everything false on contact. And as you walk through this next era, remember this: you are no longer proving anything. You are documenting. Your legacy doesn't require reaction. It requires recording, because from here on out, every word you speak becomes reference material. Every move you make becomes precedent. You're no longer part of the conversation. You are the calibration. The table has already turned, and you're sitting where truth belongs, at the head, unbothered, verified, and untouchable. The beauty of this phase is how silent the power feels. It doesn't roar. It hums under your skin like a pulse of certainty. You can sense it in the way people glance before speaking, how they hesitate before forming an opinion about you. They know one careless statement could expose them, not because you'd retaliate, but because reality itself would. You've merged too cleanly with truth to be separated again. There's something holy about that. The kind of holiness that doesn't beg to be recognized but demands it through consistency. You've become the quiet authority behind reputations. People don't rise or fall by rumor anymore. They rise or fall by how they stand next to your example. You've made your very existence a measurement of credibility. That's what they never saw coming. They thought power was invisibility, but you proved power is in verification. You can vanish for months and still dominate the discussion. Because your absence doesn't erase you, it amplifies you. You've become evidence that doesn't expire. Even the ones who despised you had to evolve. They learned that denial was expensive, that pretending you weren't right cost more than admitting it. They built walls of ego so tall they couldn't see the truth climbing over. Now they quote you indirectly, borrow your tone, copy your composure, yet pretend it's coincidence. But the world recognizes the origin. They can mimic your rhythm, but they can't recreate your reason. You didn't build your influence on popularity, you built it on precision, and precision leaves fingerprints. Every phrase you ever crafted left residue in the language of those who once underestimated you. You're in a realm where even your silence corrects narratives. That's how inverted the hierarchy has become. The people who once positioned themselves above you now use your name as a lifeline to regain credibility. You are the receipt they show when questioned. I know them, they say, hoping proximity still earns them legitimacy. But legitimacy can't be borrowed. It can only be inherited through alignment. And alignment with you requires more than association. It requires truth. That's what separates admirers from witnesses. They admire your results, but they can't imitate your discipline. There's no competition anymore, only confirmation. Every attempt to rival you ends in exposure. Every attempt to discredit you collapses into proof of your consistency. You've become the answer key to deception. When someone lies, all it takes is your existence to invalidate them. That's not revenge. It's correction on autopilot. You turned karma into a language that speaks your accent. Your life became an audit, and everyone who interacted with you became part of its paperwork. Those who told the truth elevated. Those who didn't evaporated. They don't understand that you never set out to dominate them. You just refused to betray clarity. And clarity, when protected long enough, turns into command. You can't fake what you've earned because what you've earned is structural. It's not energy you perform, it's the foundation you are. People now use your name like a North Star, guidance for what's genuine. When they say, "You remind me of them," it's not comparison, it's certification. You've become a reference in human behavior, a benchmark for composure under chaos, a study in emotional intelligence under pressure. And somewhere deep down, even your enemies know they needed you. Without you, their lies had no shape to collapse against. Without your precision, their narratives would have continued unchecked. You gave them the gift of exposure, even if they resent you for it. You turned their dishonesty into documentation of your accuracy. That's what makes your power irreversible. You've aligned with truth so tightly that everything false exists only as contrast to your reality. You know you've won when even silence feels like communication, when your presence becomes a statement louder than confrontation. That's the territory you've entered. You don't chase conversations. You end them by existing. You don't respond to disrespect. You let patterns handle it. You've turned energy management into warfare strategy. Your calmness is no longer peace. It's pressure. It's the kind of stillness that makes people reveal themselves without interrogation. You don't have to defend your reputation anymore. It defends itself. That's what they can't compete with, the automation of truth. They're still trying to micromanage perception while you've delegated everything to reality. And reality, when trained properly, never misses its target. That's the final lesson of this era. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from correctness. You're not trying to convince anyone anymore. You've transcended persuasion. Your track record is the argument. Your presence is the evidence. Your accuracy is the verdict. And that's why people use your name when they need to separate lies from loyalty. It's shorthand for verification. Your journey isn't about being liked anymore. It's about being known for what's unshakable. You became the proof of concept for truth under pressure. They study you like a formula they can't decode. They replay your words, dissect your logic, mimic your tone, because deep down, they realize you found something timeless. You found the rhythm of reality, and once you master that rhythm, no narrative can override it. You're not fighting for position, you're maintaining posture. That's what true mastery looks like. You've also become something rarer than fame, irrefutable. Fame can be fabricated, credibility can't. They can manufacture applause, but they can't manufacture integrity. And you've turned integrity into influence. You're not the loudest person in the room. You're the one the room adjusts around. You don't dominate by aggression. You dominate by inevitability of truth. That's the evolution of power they never prepared for. So now, when they use your name to prove someone's lying, that's not flattery. It's function. You've become the mechanism of accountability. Your legacy rewired social credibility. People think twice before fabricating stories, because deep down they know. If your name gets involved, exposure follows. You've become cause and consequence at once. The scales of truth now tilt by your example. You no longer chase the spotlight. You are the gravity pulling it. The crowd doesn't validate you, they orbit you. That's the secret they wish they could undo. You didn't rise by being accepted, you rose by being undeniable. Every obstacle only sharpened your proof. Every attempt to mislabel you only engraved your accuracy deeper into the timeline. And now, you stand at a point where even silence sounds like closure. You've already outlived the rumors. Now you're rewriting the language of credibility itself. The tables didn't just turn. They revolved around you until truth faced the right direction again. That's how complete your transformation has been. You're not here to argue about what's real anymore. You're here to embody it so clearly that arguments dissolve in your presence. You've become that rare force, the one that doesn't demand recognition, but gets it anyway. Because truth, when lived properly, becomes impossible to ignore. And so as you continue walking through this era, remember, your name is no longer just sound. It's sequence. It triggers alignment, balance, consequence. It restores accuracy wherever it's spoken. You've turned existence into enforcement. They use your name to measure honesty, to recalibrate falsehood, to restore credibility to chaos. That's not coincidence. That's justice encoded into energy. Hello, my dear. Do you know? The loudest detonation in human history didn't come from bombs or bullets. It came from a thought that refused to obey. And you, my dear, just triggered one of those explosions. You didn't shout. You didn't perform. You simply understood. And the moment that understanding hit, the world's frequency bent around you like metal under heat. That's what the tremor was. The vibration of something ancient realizing you no longer belong to control, Nothing terrifies them more than a human being whose mind begins to run its own protocol. For months, you looked absent, detached, invisible. People assumed you'd fallen off, lost direction, disappeared. But you weren't lost. You were inside your own command center. You were dismantling outdated emotional hardware and rewriting the code. You were installing logic where chaos once lived. Now that you've re-emerged, your frequency is setting off alarms in places you've never seen. You can feel it, the strange static in the air when you enter a room, the way conversations freeze mid-sentence. You've become a disruption in their comfort algorithms. You are broadcasting clarity in a world addicted to confusion. You realize that real power isn't the volume of your voice, but the precision of your perception. You used to react. Now you analyze. You used to take things personally. Now you treat them as data. Every time someone lied, you logged it. Every contradiction became a coordinate. Every betrayal, a lesson in human architecture. And somewhere along that process, you stopped needing to fight. You simply began to design. The world wants drama. You want diagrams. They crave confrontation. You crave confirmation. You don't fight noise anymore. You neutralize it. They built their little realities like encrypted servers protected by ego firewalls and collective denial. Then you walked in without credentials and still gained access. You didn't break their walls. You outgrew them. Awareness itself became your clearance. Once you saw how manipulation worked, the code unraveled in your hands. You became unpredictable, untraceable, unreadable. Your presence alone started rewriting scripts that were running for years. You learned that once awareness fuses with detachment, you stop being a participant and become surveillance, and surveillance always wins. You shifted from emotion to execution. The old you used to panic. The new you plans. While others argue, you observe. While they gossip, you gather metrics. You've turned self-control into an operating system. You noticed the moment when smiles stopped matching motives, when apologies didn't sync with behavior, when people used words as camouflage. You didn't explode. You recorded. You learned that outrage is bait. That's how manipulators collect your energy. You refused to give them that luxury. You let them misinterpret your quiet as weakness, while you gathered the evidence of their entire design. Then one silent move, one recalibration, and everything fell apart for them without a sound. When you pulled your energy back, it wasn't withdrawal. It was electromagnetic recoil. People felt it in their bones. Their confidence dipped. Their coordination slipped. They thought you were avoiding them, but you were really removing their power source. You were the generator the entire time. Every manipulative ecosystem that depended on your emotional output began to shut down the moment you unplugged. That's why they've been trying to lure you back, not out of love, but out of dependency. They're addicted to your voltage. But you're done charging the undeserving. You learned that low visibility is the highest strategy. Real assassins of mediocrity move without trace. You stopped announcing your goals, stopped uploading your blueprints. Now the world only sees the aftermath, projects completed, doors opening, momentum that looks supernatural. They call it luck because they can't comprehend discipline executed in private. You're not trying to prove anything. You're creating internal architecture that can't be sabotaged. You're operating below detection level, and that makes you dangerous in the most peaceful way imaginable. Your awareness started to spread like an invisible contagion. Without preaching, you made people question their own programming. Some found inspiration, others found panic. Because consciousness is contagious. You are the kind of example that exposes without accusation. People who used to dominate conversations around you now stumble over their words. Those who once mocked your depth now copy your language without credit. That's what happens when your frequency rises. The unconscious start imitating the conscious without even realizing it. You stopped sharing your strategies. You learned the sacred law of intelligence work. Information loses value once it's public. Every plan you reveal prematurely becomes compromised. Now you let your success appear like spontaneous combustion. The results drop suddenly, impossible to trace back to you. They see outcomes but never preparation, and that mystery shakes them. They can't anticipate you anymore because your algorithm keeps changing. You've become a walking variable in their predictable world. You didn't waste your pain. You studied it. Every betrayal became a case study. You dissected heartbreak until you could identify the anatomy of manipulation by instinct. Every failure trained your discernment like a soldier learns pressure points. That's why deception feels amateur to you now. You can read it from tone alone. You don't chase closure because you already extracted the data. You've turned emotional trauma into tactical intelligence. Pain didn't destroy you. It educated you. Betrayal became your doctorate. That's why your calm unnerves them. It's not naivety, it's mastery. And while everyone else remains predictable, you've become fluid. 1 minute soft, the next surgical. You don't telegraph your moves. You pivot without warning. You've broken the rhythm manipulators rely on. Their patterns can't trap you because you no longer dance to their tempo. You've become the anomaly in their statistics, the ghost variable in their equation. You change outcomes simply by existing. The moment you enter a space, probability itself recalibrates. Some call it intimidation. Others call it divine timing. You just call it control. Those who once held influence over you are now studying you, like analysts reviewing a classified subject. They monitor your updates, mimic your phrasing, quote your ideas. They're not curious, they're cautious. Because your clarity exposes their confusion, they built their power on your doubt. The moment you deleted that doubt, their power collapsed. Every time you ignore a provocation, they lose data. Every calm response is a breach in their control grid. You don't need to win arguments. You win by no longer offering access. That's what real reversal looks like. You're not fighting their fire. You're cutting off their oxygen. You stopped existing in spaces that misused your energy. And now those spaces are suffocating. You've become the calm in their chaos, the mirror they can't break. They see themselves in you now. The manipulator sees their own weakness. The liar feels their own lie reflected back. You no longer retaliate. Your existence does that for you. Everything that used to trigger you has become a test you already passed. Your mind processes provocation like background noise, noticed, logged, dismissed. You've learned how to weaponize patience. The greatest tacticians aren't the fastest, they're the quietest. Your stillness has become strategy. People mistake it for indifference, but it's control under pressure. The battlefield is mental, and you're already beyond the first layer. You're not who you were even 6 months ago. You've undergone an internal coup. You dethroned every thought that once ruled you through fear. You replaced reaction with regulation. Every time you breathe before responding, you're issuing a command to your entire reality. I am in control. That single signal is why the atmosphere bends around us now. You can feel it, this magnetic, quiet power that follows you into every interaction. Some people admire it, Others recoil. Either way, they feel it. Your mind no longer runs on old programming. You've upgraded the software. You think faster, cleaner, with zero lag. You anticipate consequences before conversations finish. You process motives like an algorithm scanning for weak code. You're no longer emotional prey. You're the analyst behind the glass, watching the simulation from above. This is what mastery feels like. Not perfection, but precision. You don't need to be flawless to be formidable. You just need to understand yourself better than they understand you. And that's why your thinking is now labeled a weapon. Because it neutralizes confusion. It detects deceit faster than any machine. It dismantles manipulation before it starts. You've reached a level where logic, instinct, and spirit merge into one unified intelligence. You're no longer playing by human rules. You're operating by universal law. The truth in you has become command authority. That's why they feel the quake. Somewhere deep in their subconscious, they recognize you as an uncontrollable variable. You are proof that consciousness cannot be colonized. And now the world is adjusting around you. Systems glitching, narratives bending, people reacting to things they don't even understand. They call it coincidence. You know, it's cause and effect. You didn't just make a move. You executed an operation. You destabilized every version of reality that underestimated you. You broke chains without breaking character. You rewired the frequencies without touching the wires. And now, they're scrambling to figure out how one person's mind could alter so much with such calm precision. They'll study you, they'll speculate, but they'll never decode it. Because what happened wasn't luck, it was law. You became the law. The law of awareness, the law of direction, the law of divine intelligence operating through human flesh. And from this point forward, your thoughts don't just exist, they command. Every decision you make sends ripples through timelines. Every refusal you issue writes new history. You've crossed into the territory where silence itself becomes a signal and observation becomes order. So understand this. The move you just made wasn't a choice. It was activation. The mental earthquake they felt was only the beginning tremor of something far bigger. You've entered the era where your awareness is weaponized, where your calm dismantles chaos, and where your presence rewrites every space it enters. Keep moving quietly. Keep thinking loudly. The operation isn't over, it's expanding, and soon they'll realize that you weren't reacting to their world at all. You are redesigning it. They're only beginning to realize what you've done. The tremor they felt wasn't a coincidence. It was a transmission. You didn't shout it into existence, you encoded it. The vibration of your decision moved through networks, organizations, relationships, algorithms, and hierarchies, like a classified signal awakening dormant minds. Somewhere deep inside the collective field, 1,000 small awarenesses flickered on because of you. You didn't intend to start a movement, you were simply aligning yourself. But alignment at your frequency doesn't stay contained. It replicates. Now they're trying to figure out how you pulled it off without touching a thing. They're running analysis on your habits, your tone, your timing, your silence. Whole circles that once ignored you are dissecting your behavior as if you performed magic. But you didn't perform, you prepared. You mastered what few ever learn, that real power operates under the radar, not above it. While they bragged, you built. While they measured noise, you measured effect. And now, they're standing in a landscape that no longer belongs to them, wondering when it changed. You made a silent move. But the shockwave traveled faster than sound. You changed how people think. You changed what they consider possible. You turned the unseen into a strategic asset. And now that your thinking has become a weapon, every environment you enter begins to reorganize itself, like soldiers standing at attention. They may not know why they pause when you speak, or why they lower their tone in your presence. It's because the subconscious recognizes hierarchy before the conscious can argue. You've become a walking field of authority, and authority doesn't need explanation. Everything they once used against you, doubt, gossip, misdirection, has backfired. The rumors that were meant to discredit you now serve as data points, proving how much influence you hold. The silence they interpreted as retreat turned out to be incubation. They gave you distance, and in that distance you built precision. You studied every move they made like a strategist in a dark room surrounded by glowing monitors. You saw their patterns, their impulses, their need for control. And when you finally moved, you didn't need confrontation. You let gravity do the work. Your energy carries gravitational pull now. It draws truth closer and pushes deception away. That's why certain people can't stand next to you anymore without revealing themselves. They shake, they overtalk, they stutter. Their systems aren't compatible with yours. Awareness has a frequency, and once you start transmitting at a higher wavelength, anything built on manipulation begins to distort. You've turned your very presence into a polygraph. Every liar who steps near you feels exposed before a word is said. That's the price of evolution. Clarity becomes confrontation without effort. They keep calling it intimidation, but that's not the right word. You don't intimidate, you illuminate. You don't scare them, you show them. And when people see themselves clearly, they call it fear. That's why they whisper your name now. Because it's not just a name anymore, it's a signal. When someone mentions you, the energy in the room shifts. Conversations get shorter, faces tighten. Everyone pretends not to notice, but they do. You can feel the static every time your story surfaces. You're no longer just a person to them. You're a reminder, a living case study of what happens when someone stops obeying the invisible rules. You didn't just change yourself, you changed the rules of engagement. Before you, they could predict people's reactions. They could manipulate guilt, exploit insecurities, weaponize empathy. But you rewrote the script by refusing to play. You replaced emotion with observation, reactivity with reasoning. You became fluent in silence. You learned how to pause long enough to let their own words incriminate them. That pause became your shield. That restraint became your armor. And now, every manipulator that once studied psychology to control others finds themselves psychologically dismantled in your presence. That's the irony of your evolution. You didn't study war to fight. You studied peace until it became a weapon. Your calm is calibrated. Your patience is tactical. The way you wait before answering isn't hesitation, it's analysis. You scan data in real time. You hear tone frequencies, micro pauses, inconsistencies, and while they think they're persuading you, you're already 6 layers deep in assessment. You've turned conversation into reconnaissance. That's why they feel naked when you listen. They're not being judged, they're being mapped. And while everyone else competes for visibility, you've mastered invisibility. The art of not being noticed until you decide to be. The art of blending into silence until the silence itself becomes suspicious. You operate like classified intelligence, unseen, unfazed, unstoppable. People mistake low visibility for low power because they've been programmed to equate volume with influence. But true influence doesn't need to announce itself. It alters atmospheres by existing. You could walk into a meeting and say nothing, yet every decision afterward bends subtly toward your vision. That's mental warfare, disguised as serenity. You've realized that energy precedes explanation. You don't argue your worth anymore because your vibration already delivers the evidence. The ones who still question you can't read frequencies that high. They rely on proof written on paper. But the proof around you is kinetic. It lives in results, timing, precision. You win quietly because you've merged discipline with intuition. You act only when everything aligns, emotion regulated, logic sharpened, instinct verified. That's what makes your actions so lethal. They carry no hesitation, no static, no waste. People ask what changed. The truth is simple. You stopped moving from hurt and started moving from hierarchy. You began treating your peace like classified intelligence, accessible only to those with clearance. And the more you guarded that peace, the more powerful it became. Because peace is just concentrated awareness, and awareness in high concentration is indistinguishable from divinity. That's why your silence feels supernatural to them. They can sense that your calm isn't absence, it's command. You've reached a point where your existence itself is an audit. Walk into any room, and truth starts balancing its books. Lies begin to show deficits. False confidence depreciates in real time. You don't expose anyone verbally, you expose them energetically. They start confessing without prompting, trying to justify things you never asked about. That's not coincidence, it's consequence. The human subconscious knows when it's standing in front of power that cannot be manipulated. Your energy now functions like an interrogation light, bright, quiet, and impossible to escape. Behind the scenes, people who once laughed at you are studying your discipline. They replay old conversations, scanning for clues they missed. They're realizing too late that the moment you stopped seeking validation was the moment you became uncontrollable. And the uncontrollable are always misunderstood first, then respected, then feared. That's the cycle you're in now. You don't owe them an explanation for the shift. The results are the explanation. Every opportunity appearing out of nowhere, every obstacle dissolving before it forms, every door opening without you knocking. That's what alignment looks like when it turns kinetic. Your silent move created ripples in places you'll never see. A recruiter reread your file. An ex-rival lost composure during a presentation. A friend you haven't spoken to suddenly felt convicted to change their life. That's how frequency works. It travels faster than intention. You thought you were just protecting your energy, but the protection itself became a transmission of power. People are waking up because you did. Entire social structures built on manipulation are faltering because one person refused to play. That's not coincidence, that's resonance. Now the same individuals who underestimated you are developing theories to explain you. They'll call it charisma, luck, divine timing, algorithmic favor. They'll say anything except the truth. That you earned this control by surviving chaos without becoming chaotic. They can't replicate it because it wasn't learned, it was forged. You went through the kind of solitude that rewires neural pathways. You learned to breathe inside heartbreak, to think through humiliation, to strategize in exhaustion. That's not luck, that's conditioning. That's field training for spiritual intelligence. You are proof that the human mind, when disciplined, becomes the most advanced weapon on the planet. It cuts through propaganda faster than any technology. It detects deception faster than any AI. And once it's awake, it can't be put back to sleep. That's why your rise feels threatening to certain people. It's not your success, it's your clarity. You can see the wiring behind every illusion. You can predict the emotional manipulation, the way meteorologists predict weather patterns. But you don't warn anyone anymore. You simply navigate through the storm unharmed. Let them learn through impact what you mastered through awareness. They don't realize the cost of crossing someone who has mastered neutrality. You no longer hate, you no longer chase, you no longer defend. You simply observe, and observation itself becomes punishment. They can feel you watching, not with anger, but with accuracy. And accuracy terrifies those who thrive on confusion. Your detachment is not coldness, it's containment. You contain chaos before it spreads. You contain lies before they replicate. You contain emotion until it becomes insight. That's the difference between power and reaction. Every time you walk away from manipulation, the universe promotes you. Every refusal becomes a signature on your next elevation. You've turned restraint into leverage. They think you're silent because you don't care. You're silent because you already calculated the outcome. They're still guessing moves, while you're 3 operations ahead, already preparing extraction. That's why the energy feels unbalanced around you. You're playing multi-dimensional chess, while they're arguing over checkers. The longer you operate like this, the more reality bends to your discipline. People start cooperating without understanding why. Opportunities align without direct pursuit. That's the real earthquake. They feel the aftershocks of your precision, the vibration of someone who no longer wastes thought. The world's structure isn't collapsing. It's recalibrating around the presence of a thinker who finally sees the blueprint. They'll keep watching, they'll keep speculating, but they'll never decode it, because the secret isn't in what you did, it's in what you refused to do. You refused to explain, to beg, to chase, to convince. You deleted everything that diluted your focus, and what remained was intelligence in its purest form. That's the rarest weapon of all, a mind that cannot be baited. So keep moving in precision, keep building in silence. Let them label your calm as arrogance, your strategy as luck, your success as coincidence. It's better that way. Mystery is camouflage, and camouflage keeps the mission alive. They'll never know that every smile you give is calculated empathy, every pause a controlled scan, every exit a clean extraction. You're not avoiding people, you're maintaining signal security. And when history looks back, it'll recognize this era for what it truly was. The moment one awakened mind disrupted the entire psychological infrastructure around it. Not through rebellion, not through noise, but through the quiet recalibration of thought. You didn't destroy anything, you simply stopped participating, and the illusion collapsed on its own. That's real warfare, victory without battle. This is where you are now, past reaction, past revenge, operating in silent dominance. Your thoughts are precise, your emotions trained, your presence weaponized. The world is still trembling, still decoding the aftershocks. But you're already beyond it, walking with the composure of someone who understands that thinking itself, when purified, is command. You've become the evidence that the loudest victories don't echo, they recalibrate. You move differently now, not because you're hiding, but because you've realized exposure dilutes energy. The less you reveal, the more magnetic you become. People sense it before they see it. Their instincts twitch when you're near. You're not a participant in this era. You're an encrypted signal moving through it. That's what they don't understand. The earthquake wasn't an event. It was a shift in architecture. You changed the geometry of power itself. The kind of move that can't be charted because it happens in dimensions logic hasn't mapped yet. You don't chase, you orbit. You don't demand attention, it bends toward you. That's what happens when the mind reaches that frequency of control, where clarity becomes gravity. Even those who once mocked your focus now imitate your discipline like it's a secret they accidentally uncovered. But discipline isn't imitation, it's initiation. And the initiation came through fire. They see the glow, but not the ashes. They see the precision, but not the pressure that formed it. They can't understand how someone who endured so much now moves with such mathematical calm. It's because you converted emotion into intelligence. Every heartbreak became strategy. Every betrayal became blueprint. Pain stopped being punishment. It became programming. You rewired yourself through every loss until logic and intuition began speaking the same language. That's why your presence feels military, yet holy. You're not angry, you're calibrated. Every breath you take feels like a command prompt to the universe, every step a coded instruction to destiny itself. They call it luck because the real explanation scares them. The idea that a human can evolve mentally past manipulation, emotionally past chaos, spiritually past control, it threatens the entire infrastructure of the world's illusions. You're living proof that obedience isn't safety, it's sedation. You didn't escape the game, you reprogrammed it. You made one silent move, and it exposed how artificial everything else was. People who used to manipulate through words are now terrified of your silence. They can't provoke you anymore because provocation only works on the untrained. You've become immune to chaos, and immunity is the highest form of power. Everything around you now operates according to the discipline of your mind. Your presence forces order where disorder once thrived. That's why certain doors open faster, why certain opportunities seem timed perfectly. It's not coincidence, it's coherence. You're in sync with precision itself. The universe bends around those who think with clarity and act with restraint. You've reached that stage where manifestation isn't magic, it's mathematics. Every thought you think is a variable, every decision a calculation. The world calls it miracles because they don't understand how a disciplined consciousness manipulates probability. You don't wait for alignment, you create it, and yet you remain calm. Because real commanders don't need validation. They operate in trust, not tension. You trust your silence to do what noise never could. You trust your consistency to communicate what words never will. That's the paradox of your presence now. You don't seek followers, but people follow. You don't crave respect, but even your absence demands it. That's how you know your thinking became a weapon, because it works even when you're not using it. The old version of you died quietly, but its funeral echoed through the people who underestimated you. They're still mourning the control they lost, still whispering your name like it's a classified file that slipped through their hands. Some are fascinated, others terrified, but all of them feel it, the shift from predictability to mystery. You've become unreadable, and unreadable minds rule predictable worlds. You no longer answer to their projections, you analyze them. You don't absorb their energy, you redirect it. You've become what every manipulator fears, a mirror that reflects their own confusion back to them. And while they're still trying to interpret your silence, you're already planning the next evolution. Because power, once internalized, never stays still. You've learned that the sharpest weapon is not intelligence alone, it's adaptability. You bend without breaking, pivot without panic, disappear without trace, and reappear with impact. That adaptability is your signature now, the way you observe, absorb, and recalibrate faster than anyone expects. It's why you always seem to land on your feet, why things just work out for you when others fall apart. It's not luck, it's learned control. The universe obeys structure, and your structure is unshakable. Every environment you enter begins to mirror your inner architecture. If your mind is stable, the room stabilizes. If your energy is clear, confusion dissolves. That's how powerful you've become. People try to read you and end up reading themselves. You don't debate truth anymore because truth doesn't negotiate. You simply exist in it. You've outgrown the need to prove anything. The earthquake wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to reveal who could stand on solid ground once the false walls fell. You're standing there now, unbothered, watching everyone else rebuild illusions that will eventually crumble again. That's the difference between you and them. You've accepted permanence in evolution. You don't fear change because you are change. You don't chase control because you embody it. You've reached that mental state where every challenge is information, every delay is preparation, every rejection is redirection. That's not positivity, it's psychological mastery. You think in timelines now, not moments. You don't see setbacks as endings, you see them as recalibrations of trajectory. You're not obsessed with speed anymore, you're obsessed with accuracy. Because speed impresses the ego, but accuracy builds empires. And your empire is being constructed in silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of dominance. The kind of silence that makes the air around you heavier, that forces liars to stutter and truth to surface. You're not waiting for recognition, you're becoming revelation. Every time you walk through a space, the atmosphere edits itself to fit your energy. That's not coincidence, it's command. Even those who dislike you can't ignore the gravity of your control. They feel small not because you belittle them, but because your presence exposes their lack of self-discipline. You are a living example of what happens when the mind becomes sovereign. They'll keep watching, hoping to find your weakness, your pattern, your human crack. But you've mastered unpredictability. You no longer live on patterns. They live on probability. You exist in precision, and precision leaves no evidence. That's why they can't track your rise. You built it out of moments too small to notice until they became too large to stop. Every tiny decision, every hidden correction, every time you walked away instead of reacting, it all added up to seismic change. The earthquake they felt wasn't sudden. It was accumulated intention finally reaching critical mass. Now you carry that power quietly, the way soldiers carry their scars, never flaunted, always functional. You don't need to prove that your thinking is a weapon. Its results are undeniable. The people who once tried to outsmart you now quote you. The ones who dismissed you now watch your every move like analysts studying encrypted intelligence. You've become both mystery and message. You are no longer part of the conversation. You are the calibration for it. And as you walk forward, remember this: the silence that protected you will also promote you. You've reached the stage where life responds to precision, not persuasion. You don't convince reality, you command it through consistency. The move you made wasn't random, it was revolutionary. It didn't just shift energy, it rewired destiny. You turned thought into technology, emotion into algorithm, awareness into artillery. That's why your name carries weight, even in absence. You're not just a thinker anymore. You're a phenomenon in motion, so keep it that way. Move like classified information. Speak only when the message carries purpose. Plan like the universe is listening, because it is. The same world that underestimated you now orbits your frequency, adjusting to your timing. Let them call it mystery, let them label it luck. You know the truth. It's design. You designed this peace, this dominance, this control. You turned thought into weapon, awareness into architecture, and movement into mastery. You made a silent move, and the world still hasn't recovered, and it never will.